All right, here in chapter 9 of the book of Hebrews, Paul is going to not double down necessarily on the ideas of the Old Testament, but he's going to go back and get a little bit more specific about some of the principles and ideas of the law of Moses from the Old Testament and how they help point us to Christ. Basically, why we need to follow Christ in our day and age. Verse 1, then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary. So this is again talking about making the covenants and sacrifices and things in the temple, or for the for the Old Testament, it was the tabernacle of Moses back then. Verse 2, for there was a tabernacle made, the first wherein was the candlestick and the table and the shewbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. And over it the cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. So Paul is now describing the temple. So we have the outer temple wall that creates the tabernacle, the congregation, which is where most people could come to preach, or not preach, I should say, but to learn the gospel and offer sacrifices. In that courtyard, big courtyard areas where the laver for washing, ritual washings would be, the oil that's been anointed for ritual anointings, the altar where they would do the burnt offerings and the sacrifices and things on would be in this area as well. It's where most of the things that were done in the temple were done, is in this courtyard of the congregation. But then there's a smaller building that Paul's bringing up here. And inside that, this small building was divided into two smaller rooms with a veil in between them. So there was a door, an entrance, kind of a veil, if you will, to get into this room. And then there was the veil to get into the holiest place. So the first room is known as a holy place. This is where the tables were with the candlesticks and things. And then there's the veil into the holiest place, or the Holy of Holies, which is where the Ark of the Covenant was. And what was in the Ark of the Covenant, the pot of manna, Aaron's rod, the tables of the covenant, the stone tablets that Moses brought down, all that was in the Ark. And then the top of the Ark had the two cherubims, the wings pointing towards each other, and in the middle, between them, in the middle of it was a seat known as the mercy seat, or the seat of God, the judgment seat type idea is where that is. So he's describing the temple, basically, here. Verse 6, now when these things were thus ordained, the priests went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of God. So that's that first holy room where the candlesticks and things were. But into the second went the high priest alone once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. So once a year, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies with the offering. They would kill a lamb, take the blood in a bowl, go into there, and he would take a handful of blood and basically toss it on the mercy seat. And this was talking about the atonement. The blood of the lamb basically covers the people's sins. So pleading at the mercy seat, demonstrating the sacrifice has been made for the people, basically. And so that's what he did once a year. Now what's cool about this is there's the story of Zacharias. If you go watch those videos, they're really cool because it's so rare that it could be a decade or more before you got the chance. There's so many high priests in Jerusalem during the Savior's birth, around that time, that it was rare to get the opportunity, once in a lifetime, to go in and do this, officiating as the high priest. So it happened to fall on Zacharias that he went in, and that's when he got the angel visited him and said, you're going to have a son. His son's name is going to be John. He's the Baptist and things. Really cool story. Go back and watch those videos in the New Testament to think about this is the high priest role. That's what Zacharias was doing. So verse 8, the Holy Ghost, this signifying that the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, while as the first tabernacle was yet standing. So mentioning that the tabernacle wasn't complete. Only the high priest could go in the holiest of holies. It was very limited in what you could do. It was more symbolic than anything else. Verse 9, which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect, as pertaining to the conscience, which stood only in meats and drinks, and divers washings and carnal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. So these various washings or baptisms, these are the priests had ritual washings and anointings they would do to prepare them to officiate as priests. And so he says here basically that it kind of, we go through these motions, we do these things, some of the ordinances got changed over time, but the whole point of us isn't to do them as much as they are there to help remind us of Christ. So basically, until the time of Reformation or the second coming or last days before Christ comes type idea in verse 10. Verse 11, but Christ, being come and high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. This is using the Old Testament concepts and ideas, but equating them with Christ. So we didn't need this once a year thing with a high priest who's imperfect. He didn't become perfect by doing this. He did it it didn't help him. It helped people point to Christ, is what he's saying. These early ordinances were indirect, basically. And so, but Christ came, and he was the real high priest, and he didn't need to go to God with the blood of a goat. He went with his own blood as the Lamb of God to give himself as a sacrifice for us. That's what he's saying here basically in verse 12. Neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So again, it was his life and his literal blood. He went to heaven and said, I have paid the price. I have done it. This is the proof. Here's my scars. Here's my wounds. My blood was spilled for them. I have done the work I've been asked to do. Verse 13, for if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of an heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifieth to the purifying of flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? So this is an interesting comparison that Paul makes here in verses 13 and 14, saying, if, let's just say that the blood of these lambs that we sacrifice in the temple, if that actually had a purifying effect on us, then how much more of a purifying effect would Christ's blood be when he spills it for us? So he's kind of saying, let's just take this idea of when you sacrifice a lamb, basically in the temple, that it literally has a direct effect on us. If it did, then how much more would that effect be with Christ? Now we know, like he said earlier, it doesn't, but Christ did. The point of the animal sacrifices were to point us to Christ. But Christ came and then finally did the sacrifice. So it is in effect, which is why we don't do animal sacrifice anymore, because Christ is the one that did it. It was pointing to him. And now we remember his sacrifice instead of look forward to his sacrifice, basically. Verse 15, and for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. So this is again about sacrifice. So Paul's talked about the sacrifices they did in the old tabernacle, the traditional things that Moses put in, and how Christ has fulfilled all of that, basically. Now, what's interesting in verse 15, when it talks about New Testament, the Greek word that is translated as testament also means covenant. In fact, Joseph Smith in his translation substitutes the word covenant in there. So it would read, and for this cause he is the mediator of the new covenant, by that means of death for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament or covenant, which they are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. So there was a covenant given to Abraham. Christ takes that covenant and amplifies it with a new covenant, an expanded covenant. That's what Christ has done for us, basically. We follow Christ, and he helps us get the rest of the way to heaven. It's only through him we have a chance. We can work all we want at it. We can't get there without him. But we still have to do what he asks of us. So our works don't get us to heaven. Our works get us to work with Christ, and he helps us get to heaven. Verse 16, for where a testament is, there, or covenant, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. So this is an interesting principle we have. Bruce R. McConkie talks about this. He says, in legal usage, a testator is one who leaves a valid will or testament at his death. The will or testament is the written document wherein the testator provides for the disposition of his property. As used in the gospel sense, a testament is a covenant. Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant or testament, that is, of the gospel which came to replace the law of Moses. Paul mixed these legal and gospel definitions to teach a basic doctrine. Christ had to die to bring salvation. The testament or covenant of salvation came in force because of the atonement worked out in connection with that death. Christ is the testator. His gift, as would be true of any testator, cannot be inherited until his death. Christ died that salvation might come. So that's this concept idea. So Christ is now the officiator of the new covenant. And so when we are baptized, as they talk about in the New Testament things, when we follow Christ, we are joining in with that new covenant. Verse 17, for a testament is of force after men are dead, otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people, according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, this is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. So blood is the symbolism of life, basically. It was the life of Christ that was required to remit sin. So that's the atonement of Christ. Verse 23, it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So this refers, Wayman talks about this in his book, he says, this refers to the utensils used in temple service, which are patterned on heavenly examples. So the temple is a microcosm of heaven. It helps prepare us for a higher plane, higher existence of living. And Christ is the main key central point of the whole temple and why we do what we do. Verse 24, for Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with blood of others. So again, he only did it once, because he only had to do it once. He doesn't have to keep doing it over and over again. He doesn't go back through the whole process every time somebody sins. He paid it once for all of it. It's all done. So we can think of this idea that the people that lived before Christ hadn't had their sins taken care of. There's a really cool story in the apocryphal writings of all of the people who died before Christ were in some kind of a spirit prison. They were locked in this gate in darkness. And when Christ finally came, they were excited. In fact, they kept asking people, has Jesus been on the earth yet? Oh no, we should be getting close to time. Has Jesus been there yet? Oh, we should be getting closer. And then sometimes people started to die and go to heaven going, yeah, I heard the teachings of Jesus. And they're like, oh, he's there, he's teaching. That means it's close. It's time to come save us too. And so he gets killed and resurrected, and he goes to the spirits in prison, and he is a light of himself, and he comes in to illuminate, and he breaks the lock, and he opens the gate to allow those who were righteous after he finally paid the price, they get free. And then they leave, and now he's paid the price already for even us. So we don't have to go through that if we don't want to. We can go right into the more paradise side of things with Christ if we keep his commandments on the earth. That's the trick. We have to put forth our effort to follow him. And if we do that, he lets us out. Otherwise, we go to the spirit prison, basically. Let's see. Verse 26, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Here in verse 26, Collected Works of Hugh Nibley, Volume 4, said, literally, end of the world means consummation of the periods or aeons. The word aeon appears over 100 times in the New Testament, nearly always as the equivalent of the Hebrew olam hazeh, the age in which we live. An aeon is, strictly speaking, a world period, and hence was sometimes loosely employed to refer to this world of ours, our times, the wicked world, etc. But never is the sense of a span of time completely absent when this word is employed. One can stretch what he and others translate the completion of the aeon as the end of the world, but only if it is understood that the world referred to is not necessarily the physical earth or the physical universe, but the present age of men. That's Hugh Nibley's clarifying of that from the Hebrew. So verse 27, and as it is appointed unto men to once to die, but after this the judgment. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So if we look for him, we strive to build that relationship with him, we come to him, we will have that opportunity to be with him and to see him. And that's awesome. That's wonderful. The atonement does a lot for us. And that's the whole point of the temple, is to think about Christ and his atonement and what he's done for us. So the temple brings us closer to Christ. That's the point of it. So let's jump to the next chapter of Hebrews as we continue to move forward.